Amidst the raging war going on in the West Asia, India is facing crisis of natural gas and crude oil supply. As most of India's gas coming from the West Asia, Middle East region, countries such as Qatar, which are the major supplier of India, they are facing disruption due to the disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, as Iran has kept on attacking on the ships passing through this particular area. And in this context, what we are witnessing is that though we are heavily dependent on oil and natural gas on Gulf countries, here the disruption is largely felt in the supply of gas because we have other alternative for oil such as Russia. And within the natural gas component, what we are facing is a disruption to a great extent in the supply of liquefied petroleum gas, and on the other hand, LNG, there we have faced relatively less extent of supply disruption. So in this video, we will try to understand what is the major difference between LPG and LNG and why we are facing more disruption in the case of LPG. So first, if you try to understand the background of this entire topic, we know that in recent time, since February 2028, US and Israel carried out strikes and attack over the Iranian territory. Iran then responded by attacking ships and the oil refineries and oil production sites across the Gulf. Now, Strait of Hormuz have completely been disrupted because of it, though some ships are passing every now and then. But this has definitely led to a significant decline in the overall output as well as the transit of the natural gas and oil through this particular region. LPG and LNG, these are the two major fuels, liquefied petroleum gas and liquefied natural gas, which India completely depends upon in this particular area, in this particular strait, and thus it highlights the energy vulnerability the state which India finds itself to be. This recently has been accepted by the Prime Minister Modi himself when he come up and gave a briefing about the situation which we are facing as a nation. Now, if you try to look at the impact on LPG supply, to what extent disruption we are facing. So first of all, let us try to understand this from the perspective of data. India imports roughly 60% of its entire LPG requirement through the Gulf countries. And within the 60%, 90% of its LPG comes via the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow choke point which has been disrupted. That means if you look at these two numbers, we can imagine that roughly 54%, because we have 90% of 60%, so 54% of LPG supply have completely been disrupted. And because of this crisis, government has made a decision to give gas to priority consumers first. When I talk about LPG to priority consumers, it means the priority is given to the households, and the industrial consumers, commercial consumers are basically where the government is trying to cut the supply. Now, if you look at the LNG, also called as liquefied natural gas compared to LPG, 50% of this gas is imported as LNG. Within that, only 55 to 60% via Strait of Hormuz. That's where you can see the big difference. 90% of LPG is coming via Strait of Hormuz, while only 55% to 60% of LNG comes via Strait of Hormuz. That's why it is natural disruption in the supply of LNG would be relatively to a lesser extent. 30% overall, if you look here, is supply, because 50% of the 60%, so 30% supply of the overall LNG that India imports has been affected, and largely the pressure of this is being faced by industries and commercial we can say consumers who are facing repeated cuts. In the case of industries, government has decided to give them just 80% of their original quota, originally how much gas they used to take. And when you talk about the natural gas supply, largely it is used by many fertilizer industries all across India to produce urea like fertilizer. That means if the shortage of natural gas continues, we might also face problem in the fertilizer sectors, and we will have to depend upon import for several countries such as Russia, Belarus and Canada, from where we import our fertilizers. Now, let us try to also understand the basic difference between the liquefied petroleum gas and the liquefied natural gas. So, first is both are liquefied, that means they are gas, but at a lower temperature they convert into liquid form, and that's how they are stored. But the big difference comes in what they are made up of. Though are both are gases, but the composition, chemical composition varies. The way how they are stored also differs, and the general uses that definitely is different. But overall, we can say no matter whether LPG or LNG, they are key to the energy transport. Now, first take a look at the LPG. That's the liquefied petroleum gas. What is its composition and uses? So LPG is largely made up of two gases, that is propane and butane. 95% of LPG is propane and butane, and roughly 5% then you'll have the other gases. These are manufactured, produced through the oil refinery, crude oil refinery, natural gas refining, and the processing. And largely LPG in India and all everywhere across the world also used for three major purposes. Either it is used by domestic consumer for the cooking purposes that we see generally being supplied in India to people in the form of cylinders. The household consumers get a cylinder of roughly 14 to 15 kilograms, while the commercial consumer get a cylinder of roughly 19 kilograms. And here government is also trying to do some changes, because if the supply keeps on getting disrupted, government thinks that it is better to come up with a smaller volume of cylinder, and that's where you have proposal of 10 kg cylinder that can be supplied to more number of people, thus tackling the scarcity to some extent, the disruption to some extent. Apart from that, this is also used for the heating purposes and plus in the industries as well. If you compare with the liquefied natural gas, the composition of LNG is very different. There, as we have seen, LPG is made up of largely propane and butane, 95%. On the other hand, in LNG, about 85 to 95% composition is of one gas, that is methane, that is CH4, while ethane, propane, butane, and nitrogen, they make up just about 5 to 15%. So that's the biggest difference, mainly methane. Second, if you look at LNG, they are liquefied at about minus 160 degrees Celsius. At this particular temperature, which is also called as cryogenic temperature, LNG remains in liquid form, and then over a long distance it is transported. And then, for example, if we are importing LNG from, let us say, Qatar via Strait of Hormuz, then you have special tankers, the gas tankers, that carry LNG in the liquid form. When it is brought to the shoreline of India, then it is again regasified. That means it is converted, transformed into the gas form, and then we have the well-developed network of the pipelines. Through those pipelines, then the gas is basically transported in its gaseous form. Now, LPG, if you talk about cylinder, is where it is mostly used in road transport, is the backbone on which LPG travels all across India. And here also, if you look at the LPG, they need LPG, basically they are taken out from the refineries, then they are bottled. You have bottling plants everywhere, so they are bottled in the cylinders as such. After bottling, then these bottles are sent all across India to the roadway transportation. LNG, on the other hand, is needed to be put in a separate or unique category of tanks. As you can see from this photograph, this is the cryogenic tank. The temperature of this cryogenic tank had to be maintained at very low degrees, plus through ships. If you talk about at international trading, it is transported through LNG. As we need, as we have seen, needs regasification. LPG does not need regasification. Volume and efficiency wise, if you compare, the volume of LPG is roughly 1 by 260th of its actual volume. On the other hand, LNG is compressed to a greater extent. Its volume is about 1 by 600th of the actual volume. LNG is efficient but energy efficient as such. Efficient but energy intensive as such. Apart from that, delivery systems also vary. As we can see that in the case of PNG, that is piped natural gas, LPG is produced, basically is provided to consumers via cylinders, bottles, and that's why it is more friendly to the rural areas, more easily accessible to the people in rural areas, because in rural area you do not have adequate development of pipeline infrastructure. On the other hand, for urban consumers, government is continuously trying to encourage them to shift from LPG to PNG, because many people are there, many basically consumers are there who have well developed pipeline networks, and they are also very nearby or well connected to pipeline networks. So what will be the benefit? Continuous supply can be maintained via the piped natural gas or PNG as such. And as per the recent estimate, the government has put, it has stated that about 60 lakh consumers in the urban areas can within few weeks switch from LPG to PNG, and that's how they would be able to get the adequate supply of this natural gas. Now, if you look at the safety comparison, PNG, piped natural gas, they are relatively lighter than air, and that's why they are relatively safe, because even if some fire hazard, fire accidents happen, because they are lighter than air, they will keep on dissipating at a fast rate and will not have any big accident as such. LPG, on the other hand, because it remains in the liquid phase, it is relatively heavier, and that's why when they are leaking, basically they settle on the ground itself, because they're heavier than air, they are not able to disperse, so they keep on accumulating, and that's why due to the risk of accumulation, the fire hazard can turn very deadly, as you have seen at many cases such incidents take place in the India. Leakage risk, that means we can say, is higher in the case of LPG. And because LPG is pressurized and put in cylinder, if any fire hazard happens, the cylinder blast becomes a very high probability incident as such. On the other hand, since PNG, pipe natural gas supply by pipes, you can switch off the supply and then the gas would be able to dissipate easily, and thus the accidents and disasters can be easily avoided. If we talk about the entire disruption that we are facing, government has responded by first of all prioritizing the household consumers because they need it on a daily basis to ensure that they get food supply as such. That's very, very important. Second, government also has asked the petroleum refineries in India to increase the production of liquefied petroleum gas and if possible reduce the production of other we can say this commodities as such. So because of this step, about 40% increase in the LPG production we have seen in the past couple of weeks, and that to some extent has been able to cushion the disruption that we are facing. Promote the use of PNG as we have discussed before, because most of consumers can easily in the urban areas, 60 lakh consumers at least can easily switch to PNG, and also other alternative fuels are being scouted and are being basically looked upon so that industries, disruption to industries can be prevented. In conclusion, we can say by looking at the crisis unfolding in West Asia, where war seems to be becoming more and more unpredictable with passing times, and when it will end, actually it becomes very difficult to say how long will the disruption continue. Again, it is very difficult to say. That's why the best way forward is to expand the PNG infrastructure at least in the urban areas so that LPG shortage can be minimized. Second, we have to definitely reduce the import dependency, and we have several fields such as Bombay High, Krishna Godavari field. So we can try to increase our production there, domestic production can be increased. Plus we also have to shift our import partners. Today we are largely dependent upon the Middle East countries. We can try to look and find other partners across the world through which we can keep on importing the vital commodities such as oil and gas. Diversification of energy resources, in short we can say, should be the way forward going ahead from here. And overall, this, if taken in the right way, can strengthen the energy security of India and can help consumers and the people of India still cushion and basically still are able to manage the disruption that is being faced by the Strait of Hormuz choke. So that's all about this particular video. If you like the video, please like the button, share with aspirants, and subscribe to the channel for more such content. Thank you very much.